You kick the dust off your boots as you walk towards the general store. You step inside the building and its shade is a welcome reprieve from the noonday sun. Inside are two men. The older one seems very bothered.
The Silver Rooks are missing. It's been almost 2 days since anyone has seen them. I checked the stables and their carriage is still there, so I sent the sheriff up the road to the farm to see if they had walked that way.
The younger man responds, "What about Mr. and Mrs. Randolph? Has anyone seen them? You know, the butler, the maid. Has anyone checked the servants' quarters?"
I didn't think about the servants' quarters.
Hello, I'm Brad Wolf, and this is Dire Den, where we talk about D&D and tabletop RPGs. This video is our third in our campaign prep series, and we are talking about the village. In the last campaign prep video, I showed you a dungeon and how to start your adventure right there in media res at the door of the dungeon. But I also promised I would come back and show you a village and how to start your game in the village and then get to the dungeon. I'm also going to show you how to build a village by using this one as an example. And the best mindset I can suggest for building a village is to treat it like you would a dungeon. Just think of roads and buildings as hallways and rooms, and place an emphasis on social encounters over combat encounters. This can make building a village much less intimidating. Of course, the first thing you're going to put in your village is a tavern. Even though the Dungeons & Dragons tavern is nothing like historical taverns, it's a trope and we've used it for decades with good reason. It's essentially a way for the players to meet the common folk. Because let's face it, if you're gonna save the world, you need to have a reason to do it, and you need to know who you're saving it for. And here we go. This is our sample village, and we're zooming out onto our tavern. And what we're going to do to make this tavern unique is it's going to be run by a family of kobolds, and not just any old kobolds, flying kobolds. Why flying kobolds? Because they're even more interesting than regular kobolds. And this kobold family has a side hustle running the stables, which makes sense. When the adventurers come to a tavern, they need a place for their pack mule and their horses. And when it comes to grooming horses, it's much easier for a flying kobold to do it than a walking kobold. And I'm sure you can come up with your own crazy ideas for taverns. I've done a lot of different things over the years. I've had a tavern keeper who is 10 feet tall, which meant his tavern was extra large. I've had a tavern sitting on top of a waterfall, and a tiefling who ran a tavern with a bathhouse that was powered by elemental methods. Alright, now that we have the tavern out of the way, let's look at 10 things to add to your town or village to make it playable. Number 1 on the list is leadership, because every community needs structure. This includes guidance, direction, cultural expectations, social expectations, and boundaries. In most medieval fiction, you get a type of feudalism, a hierarchy of kings and queens, counts, dukes, lords and ladies, landed knights, and even mayors. That's a lot to choose from. But my understanding of medieval history is that most small villages simply had a council. And that's what we're going to do here. We have a council of matriarchs. And even on this small of a scale, we can have conflict, because each of the matriarchs will have their own concerns and potential plot hooks. And we've already set up the most immediate concern, and that's the missing Silver Rook family. And that's the plot hook that takes our players to the dungeon from last video. And I promised to connect the dungeon and this village, so more on that later. So the next thing you want to put in your town is a type of law enforcement, because someone needs to enforce the structure and boundaries laid out by the leadership. And again, from my understanding, in medieval times, the town council would also act as a type of law enforcement. However, to give us another type of NPC, we're going to add a sheriff. And one thing I find interesting about the word origin of a sheriff is it comes from the two words shire and reeve. Shire, of course, refers to a small community like a county, and reeve is a type of enforcer. What I find useful there is the sheriff can be responsible for more than just the village, but all the nearby farms and homesteads. This gives you plenty of reason for the sheriff to need help from adventurers, ergo your PCs. Number 3 on our list is equipment. Equipment is important for low-level gameplay, and it's especially important if you're running OSR-style play, where you're really focused on exploration and dungeon crawl. So it's important to have a general goods store, a market, or a bazaar in your village. This allows your players to re-equip their supplies. It also gives them an opportunity to roleplay and maybe haggle with a shopkeeper. For whatever reason, players really like to do that. So this village has a general goods store owned by Elamar, who is desperate to find the rest of the Silverrook family. Side note, his secret is he would actually be happy if the Silverrooks were gone, because it would open up a space on the town council, so a member of his family could take the open seat. Now at this point in the process, you want to start thinking about your players and their characters. But even in the early stages of prep, you can plan for the different types of characters. Number 4 on the list are things for the experts. That includes bards, rangers, and rogues. Here you could add merchant guilds, thieves guilds, assassins guilds that could all create plot hooks for your rogues and bards. Additionally, you could have Witcher-style monster hunts for the ranger. Holidays, celebrations, and festivals are always a great way to create encounters and gather NPCs in one location so the characters can show off their skills. In this case, we're going to provide some low-level magic items like Dust of Dryness that can help with the survival aspect of the game, and Dust of Disappearance and Dust of Sneezing and Choking to help out the more tricksy characters. So Draylen, the son of the store owner, is a wizard's apprentice who makes these magic items and sells them in his father's shop. Side note, since Draylen's the wizard apprentice, he'll have a plot hook for us later. Next on the list are things for the mages, and that includes sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. Now it's up to you in your campaign setting what you want to do with magic items being sold. I personally don't include major magic shops in my campaigns. I keep the amount of magic items for purchase relatively small, and mostly just common and uncommon magic item types. So since I don't include magical Walmarts in my campaigns, I include small vendors who specialize in a specific type of item, and in this case, we're going to add an herbalist who makes potions. So Opal, our gnome herbalist, sells potions of climbing, growth, and water walking. Number 6, things for the priests. This includes clerics, druids, and paladins. The obvious choice here is a shrine or a temple. You could also have a druidic circle or a knightly order. But if you want to get even more supernatural, you could have a celestial, like a Chiron or Coatl living in the town. But be aware, if you have a high-level NPC living in your village or town, then you'll need an explanation for the players to be solving problems. And that's why in anything as small as a village or town, I never put an NPC who's higher than a challenge rating of 2 or character level of 4. And if I have more than one of those in a town, I explain why they wouldn't work together, because otherwise if your town has 4 4th level characters that are all willing to work together, why aren't they going on all these quests? Therefore, in this village, we have the Temple of Radiance and Trissa, the Sun Speaker. She uses the CR2 Priest stat block. However, she can cast Lesser Restoration and remove Curse as long as she's inside the temple. It's helpful to give lower level characters access to these spells, and it's also a great way to motivate them to go on quests. And now we need to motivate our warriors. One way to do that is limit access to new weapons and new armor. For convenience sake, you could say that all weapons and all armor types are available in any village or town. However, it's more realistic for those items to be limited outside of a large city. This could motivate your warriors to travel to other locations. And note that they could pick up any weapon off of any monsters they defeat. So they could pick up a great axe off of a defeated orc or a long sword off of a defeated hobgoblin. But if they want a good quality weapon, they're going to need to buy it from somebody who makes quality weapons. So Kregok the Deep Gnome is the blacksmith in this village, and he specializes in medium armor, shields, axes, and hammers. But he can definitely recommend a good swordsmith who lives in the city nearby. Or he can take that sword you got from the fallen hobgoblin and sharpen it for you and make it better quality. So you see how setting limitations on weapons and armor is a way to motivate your players to get out there and explore. Because if your fighter really wants heavy armor and a quality sword, they're going to have to dungeon delve to defeat some bad guys, or they're going to have to travel to the city, which means your fighter is going to be more likely to take that plot hook that leads them that direction. And that's how you can use limitations on equipment to spur players toward plot hooks. And there's many other things you can put in town for your warrior classes. Fighting pits, gladiatorial arenas, strongman competitions, and martial arts tournaments, just to name a few. Another thing players really like like our pets and animals. For multiple reasons, players like these fuzzy or scaly sidekicks. And we've already established our village has a stable next to the inn, so the players will have access to horses. But let's add a pair of dwarven siblings. Varwise, the brother, raises mastiffs. And of course, these can be used as your goodest boy sidekick, or as a mount for halflings and gnomes. And the sister, Rosara, knows the spells of Find Familiar and Animal Messenger. She operates her business delivering messages to other villages, farms, and towns. But she can also teach these spells to the player characters. So once again, this gives players something to spend their coin on, or a reason to do a quest for these NPCs. Next on the list is the magical and mysterious. Remember, we're playing a fantasy setting, and the weird and the wondrous keep things interesting. For example, you could have a village that tolerates a necromancer because the zombies till and work the fields. Or you could have an arcana punk machine left here centuries ago that magically protects the town from intruders. Or you could have nearby fey or elemental magic that affects the land in some way. For our village, we're going to add a haunted tree and an abandoned wizard tower. And we'll come back to those in just a minute. Because number 10 on our list is encounters. It's great to have some encounters in town because it breaks up the monotony of shopping and just talking to quest givers. It can also provide a certain amount of investment for your players. As they go about righting the wrongs and protecting the village, they can become attached to the village. Over the years, I've definitely had players move into buildings after they cleared them of monsters, or purchase a home for themselves in a town. When players do this, it provides a quest hub for you, the DM, and a safe place for the player characters to return after adventures. And this, of course, brings us back to our intro, where shop owner Elamar is looking for the missing Silverrook family, and his son suggests searching the servant's house. When the players travel from the general goods store to the servant's house, they discover that Mr. and Mrs. Randolph are dead, and 5 crawling claws scamper about the servant's house. And they find young Daniel Silverrook locked in the cellar. Daniel will quickly spill the beans that after Miriam Silverrook died, the family became very concerned. Daniel Silverrook is betrothed to a young noble from the big city. The Silverrooks expected this marriage to improve their status, but they feared Lady Silverrook's death would cause the other family to call off the marriage, so they attempted a magic spell to bring Lady Miriam Silverrook back to life, at least long enough to attend the wedding. This included practicing this magic over and over again, hence all the crawling claws. But in the meantime, the crawling claws got loose, and Daniel locked himself in the cellar. As we know from the dungeon video, it all went horribly wrong. The rest of the Silverrooks were turned into zombies, and Lady Miriam Silverrook is now a specter. Poor Daniel doesn't know this yet, and he'll tell their players that the rest of the family headed off to the Barrows. And that's your quick and easy way to start in this village and then go to the dungeon. And the dungeon gives us plenty of first level encounters, so let's flesh out the rest of this village with some second and third level encounters. Remember our haunted tree? Well, it's not actually haunted. It's merely the entrance to an underground cavern that's home to our Spider-Fang goblins. The goblins have slowly been expanding their cave network, and they've breached the village well. So now grime and waste from the goblins' caverns is spilling into the village water supply. So now the superstitious villagers believe the haunted tree is affecting the well. And it is, but not in the magical way the villagers think. So let's add 2 more second level encounters, 1 investigation and 1 combat. Remember our dwarven siblings? Their mother, Lady Rubymane, is a member of the village council, and the rest of the villagers are extremely suspicious about her stunningly gorgeous appearance. In fact, she looks notably younger than both of her adult children. And while Varwise, her son, is extremely loyal, Rosara the daughter is willing to ask for help. It turns out Lady Rubymane made a deal with a local hag, and the hag is slowly stealing vitality from the 2 children. So effectively, the adult children are aging faster, while Lady Rubymane is growing younger. And of course, the players can venture into the forest and hunt down the hag and whatever beastly minions you give her. And we're going to put a magic scroll of knock in the hag's treasure, because that's how our players are going to get into the old wizard's tower. Remember Draylin, the shop owner's son? We said he would have a plot hook for us later. He was once the wizard's apprentice. Years ago, the wizard moved away, but Draylin still knows how to get inside. He knows that it requires the knock spell to open the door, because the door's been sealed with the arcane lock spell. Since players won't have access to a knock spell until their 3rd level, or until they defeat the hag, this ensures that your 3rd level content is locked inside the tower until the players are powerful enough to face these encounters. Long before the wizard left the tower, he lived quite comfortably, with a series of animated objects that served him and cleaned up the place. He had also summoned a spectator to defend his treasure. Clearly, the wizard expected to return, but never did and left these magical beings to themselves. Now realize spectators are conjured creatures who are made from the remains of a beholder. They're not the most mentally stable creatures. So now that the wizard is gone, the spectator believes himself to be the new wizard of the tower, and he has claimed a set of animated armor to be his body, and uses the Rug of Smothering and 2 flying swords to protect himself. Defeating these monsters and clearing out the tower could give the players a new residence. Or the players could sell the tower to one of the matriarch families and set up a reoccurring NPC to interact with for the rest of the campaign. Now regarding the 5-step campaign prep process, we've only completed the first step, and you have enough to run 4 or 5 sessions. So while you're running your dungeon and your village, you can use the time between sessions to prep the rest of the campaign. So hopefully you notice that it's not that hard to be a dungeon master. You don't even have to have all 5 of these steps complete before you start running games. And there's links to all of this in the description below. So you don't even have to build your own, you can just steal mine. And there you go, that's 10 things to add to your village other than a tavern. I hope you found that helpful as you plan your next campaign. And make sure you stay tuned because our next video will drill down into our factions and how to use factions in your campaign prep. So I'll see you next time, and thanks again for visiting the Dire Den.